as possibly you know if you've followed some of my recordings, I have concurrently found that I've taken on several very practical practices that I find in harmony with such a transformed heavenly life. Kingdom living, as I suppose I could call it, but I'd call it heavenly living, I think, really. Okay, I had an unusual beginning. Mum was extremely modern and open and well, both of them were secular, very secular, Mum and Dad. And Dad had certain qualities that Mum didn't have, but Mum in particular was very open to things that narrow religion would unquestionably, and has in the past, rejected, unless it happened to be the practices of their own religion. Mother was very into vitamins and health and diet and avoiding wrong foods. Back then, I was born in 1947, so we're talking about the 50s and essentially the 1950s, you know. And so she was before her time, and very much to someone who was concerned for the way women were oppressed and children were ill-treated, and had a soft spot for animals, although never embraced being vegetarian, which surprised me. I did, of course. At some point I thought, going fishing was going to hurt the fish, and was not assured by people that said, they don't feel they're cold-blooded. And I stopped fishing, although I enjoyed the canals and the rivers and the ponds and lakes. Such a practice had its good side, didn't it? But I didn't want to harm the fish. Well, I still explored the woods and canals and so on, because I suppose, like many children then, I'd come to love nature, which is just that bit less likely these days, with so many people living in cities and so on. I don't think city life is good for you. It may be something we can adjust to, but it might take more than the last few 100 years. It's hard to find a way in the city that is natural, I suppose I want to say. That doesn't mean to say you can't find a way that is a blessing and peaceful. But I think it's a slight handicap, to say the least. And diet too. I think, contrary to initial expectations, vegetarian diet is healthy, and vegan diet is more healthy, and whole food diet, organic, is even more healthy. And yes, you can make mistakes along the way, but be reasonable, and you'll find it's a great blessing, I think. And consistent with your, dare I say it, spiritual purity that is in fact being developed by a life of thanks and praise to God. Regular, continual, such. And there are exercises that are helpful, trivial things like a good walk each day, half an hour walking, or if you like jogging, okay, jog along. Don't stress the body, but enjoy what it can do without trying to push it to some limit. Never follow the principle of no pain, no gain. Pain is there to bless us, and we thank God for it, because it tells us, find a solution, stop doing this, you're breaking down the body, it's having trouble. It's not there to be scoffed at, ignored, or just taken for granted. It's to be guided by. Don't do that, it's painful. I had back trouble much from mid-30s onwards, and I found when I worked less, the back was much better. So I gradually moved towards working less where I could. And I did anyway because I felt I should spend more time living, and increasingly living what I understood then to be a godly life, which was largely a sort of Christian life, but apparently not quite what other Christians necessarily took to be the case. Many variations on any major religion, and I sifted through the usual spectrum of Christian ones. But ever more came out by that same door wherein I went. And there were various milestones. Well, I've mentioned, haven't I, Merlin Carothers coming across his book. That would have been in the 1960s, I think. Would it? No, that would have been in the 70s. Yes. But in the 60s, Mum, I did some yoga exercises with Mum. We never mastered meditation or anything, particularly Hindu or something, other than following the exercises by a book called Yoga for You. I think that was the title. Indra Devi. Very simple, straightforward, discussed some good postures and asanas that definitely helped as regards calming the body and the mind and bringing health and vitality. I mean, simply that. Unfortunately, that possibility with Mum came to me before Christianity, so I had a foundation and knew more about it than most Christians did, of course. But yes, I do, as you know, breathing exercise, triangular breathing, which I talked of, and you could track down if you want. I breathe into the count of something, might be 7, hold for the count of 7, breathe out to the count of 7, filling the lungs from bottom to top, emptying from top to bottom, and going on to the next breath, not pausing in between breaths particularly at all. And I've just done 50 of those while listening to the last recording, because that takes roughly 30 seconds a breath. Might be a bit more, 35, 40 perhaps, sometimes. Depends how fast you count, doesn't it? And, well, I've got used to doing that, and I find, again, that very helpful in settling both of the physical body, the breathing and the heart, and the mind and one's psychological state, optimism and engaging with life. I'm basically vegan. In fact, I'm much nearer fruitarian, raw food, organic diet. You probably find that absurdly extreme. Well, just practice giving up red meat then, and that alone will be quite an achievement. Don't ever touch pork or beef or something. And you'll easily go somewhere near your boundary, and then your boundary of acceptance will shift out, and you'll probably give up all meat and then fish, and so on it goes. But you'll find your way. I'm not teaching you mine. That's not my inclination, I hope, although I've been a teacher all my life, and it's very hard for me to get out of the habit of it. But I don't think that's what's wanted. Example, yes. Opportunity to learn, yes. But not having it stuffed down your throat. You don't want that. Yeah. There are ways of improving your relationship with others. Listening is a big one, as opposed to teaching. Listening is very important. Earnest concern. I find I start to control a small group, a room, by, I mean that in a hopeful way, I trust, but simply by listening and focusing very intently on those that are talking, listening to what they're saying, not interrupting. If I say anything at all, I might bring the conversation back to them in the group by asking them a question or a follow-up. You see, people think as they express themselves. Many do. And like I do here, this is a great blessing to me, recording, because the thoughts are coming as I express them, and as I understand it, it's giving me greater access to the mind of God, and I'm of course trying to widen it so that I'm more on track, and hopefully more a blessing to you if you're finding it helpful. But it's blessing. He does a greater work in you than through you to others. Or a biblical saying somewhere in there. And even if it wasn't, it would still be true. It still is true, Don't worship Scripture. Don't worship priests and gurus and great speakers and great gifted people. Don't worship man. Worship your God. Not just God, especially not someone else's God. Worship your God, the one that personifies what you truly at heart feel is goodness. That's the only God you can really love with all your heart and soul. And you'll know you love them with all your heart and soul because increasingly all your mind and strength will be doing likewise. Your life will be transformed beautifully. And you'll be trusting your God, of course, to lead you the way that he understands or she understands to be so. How wonderful. And you'll find it true. Bless you. I say things as if they were for certain true, but I'm a master of uncertainty. I know in my heart that everything in this world is laced with uncertainty. I say, in a bizarre way, I'd say that it's almost a certainty for me. Almost. I suspect there are exceptions, but I'm not quite sure what they are. I think loving God, being a blessing, is one of them. But I think it has to be your God. I mean, there may be some gain in loving other people's God, but it's hit and miss. There's a lot of uncertainty about the religion you took up. And it was largely determined by where you lived and who you met and what you heard and what you didn't. It's not clear to me that any God will do by any means. Is there anything else I do unusual? I don't think so. I'm remarkably influenced by a chap called Paramahansa Yogananda, in particular his autobiography. I wasn't too enamoured by his other writings, but his autobiography, an account of the extraordinary people he knew in his life, I found was something that opened the mind to a greater freedom of finding good. Yes, very early on I followed a book called Straight and Crooked Thinking by Robert H. Thales. Don't suppose it's even available now. But I learnt rational thinking from that and started to do very well in my studying and so on. I became early on, I was reading Plato in the public library, in the reference section, especially things like the Republic. I mean, as a sort of 17-year-old, you know, or a 16-year-old, I suppose, 16, 17. And, yeah, I became a humanist. Rationality was something I was pretty close to worshipping, I think. And I was embracing study in incredible earnest, from being a very mediocre, non-academic schoolboy until I was, the change came somewhere around 13. And it was fortuitous, you might think, but I think actually the goodness of God, that I realized Mum was looking always at evil things, and perhaps that attracted evil. I would look on good things, the flowers on the way to school. Everything that was good I would appreciate. And as I say, I became known, my nickname was Happy at school. And yes, well, that did get lost about it after a couple of years, as I hit longing for, a girlfriend and the problems of youth, But I shifted in, of course, by then to a passion for rationality and understanding life. And perhaps you in your way have done likewise, something similar, perhaps not. And I'm not saying you have to come my way, but I am saying that, well, I think reading either John's Gospel very earnestly, especially John 17, and perhaps even listening to my various comments on it in my recordings may help you realize there's incredible value potentially there. But if not, you might take a road like reading the autobiography by Paramahansa. That was fantastic for me too. You might have been moved, but anyway, by great bits of literature like the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Mum was very interested, keen on that, my mum. You might find that something like Lobsang Rempa, I think it was called Way of the Long White Clouds or something. He wrote several books about the third eye and so on. You may just find that stirs a spirituality in you of another culture, another nation, but something that can speak to you in a way that Christianity doesn't, for some reason. It can be helpful. Traditional religion, of course, would reject many of these things, and I found to its cost. But see what you find. It's you will come your way, and your God will lead you your way in loving kindness. If that's how you see him, if that's what you value. If you see him as a warring, judgmental God, then that's the sort of life you will have, where you will fight the world and reject those around you that are not of your same opinion. But it will be to your great cost. For everything that your God allows in your life may be for a blessing, to lead you and guide you, that you may come to know good from bad eternally. Bless you. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.